So, I don't want to mess it up, so I kind of keep it here to keep me going. And so bear with me this morning, but it's a good story, so I had to share it. And what's up, Easton? She giving you trouble? Just let me know. So the title of this story is Proof. Proof, right? And so there was a professor at a college, and he was a philosophy professor. Philosophy is a big word, I know. Don't worry, let me help you out a bit. Philosophy is a way of thinking. You think about stuff, you rationalize it, you say, should I go this way? Should I go to the left or should I go to the right? So philosophy is just a way of thinking. So the philosophy professor decided, it was the first class, they're all in college. I told you, mommy and daddy has to come with him. He went and got daddy. Don't you love that? Now he's comfortable. Good job, Easton. So this philosophy professor, it's the first class. Everybody's in college. And he says, philosophy is the way of thinking. Many of us don't understand how to think clearly. And so I am going to set you straight on what philosophy is. And today, I'm going to show you proof that philosophy is the right way of thinking. So everybody was listening to him in class. Then he says, I will start off with this. Are there any Christians in this class? So, of course, there was this one guy. I'm sure there were more Christians, but they were scared. But there was this one guy, he's a Christian, and he stuck his hand up and he says, I'm a Christian. So the professor said, okay, let's use philosophy to see if we can find out if God is real. So everybody said, okay, this sounds good. So the professor says, do you believe in God? The student says, absolutely, sir. The professor says, is God good? The student says, sure. Then the professor says, is God all powerful? The student says, of course. Then the professor said, okay, my brother was sick with cancer, and I prayed to him to heal the cancer, and my brother still died. So if God is a good God, he's supposed to help people, right? Why didn't he help me? Hence, God is not a good God. And he is not all-powerful because he would have stopped the cancer. Student didn't say anything. He was quiet. He's like, let's go again. I'm going to show you philosophy works. He says, is Satan good? The student said, no, Satan is not good. He said, where did Satan come from? The student says, well, he was an angel before he fell, and then God cast him out of heaven. Aha! So, that means there is evil in this world. Yes, there is evil in this world. So the professor said, hence, God created Satan, Satan created evil. So, in essence, God created evil. The student didn't have anything to say. He was quiet again, right? Then the professor said, is there sickness? Is there hatred? Is there ugly things in this world and terrible things? The student said, yes. And then the professor said, then who created them? The student didn't answer. He says, science says you have 5 senses. And from your 5 senses, you can understand if something is real or not. You can touch it, you can taste it, you can hear it, you can do all of these things. And he turned and he looked at the student and he says, have you ever tasted God? He's like, no. Have you ever felt God? No. Have you ever seen God? The student says, no. And he says, I bet you have never heard God. And he was laughing and laughing and laughing. So the student didn't say anything. Then he looked at the student and said, but you still believe in him. And the student said, yes, I do. I have my faith. The professor said, that's the problem. Science and faith, they don't work together. So that's why I am proving today that God is not real. So the student didn't say anything. Then the student said to him, Professor, my turn. He's like, oh, you're not finished. Okay, go ahead. Let me hear what you have to say. He says, is there such a thing as cold? He's like, of course. And he says, is there such a thing as heat? Of course. He says, you're wrong. Science says there is more heat, there is mega heat, there is white heat, there is lava heat, because heat is energy. But there is no such thing as cold. What? What are you talking about? Well, if you did not know, science says cold is the word used to explain the absence of heat. I didn't know that. Well, we're just thinking the same way how you put things into perspective, so we're using philosophy to get that. So, hence, there is no such thing as cold. Students were like, well, we know there's cold because we feel it when winter comes, you know? He says, okay, I see where you're going there. Then he says, you see, I'm not finished yet. Professor says that, what's left? He says, is there such a thing as darkness? The professor said, of course. Don't you see the night when it comes? There's such a thing as darkness. What's wrong with this kid? He's like, hold on. According to science, there's no such thing as darkness. You can have little light, you can have a lot of light, you can have a flashing light, you can have a constant light, you can have a dim light, but when there is no light, then they call the absence of light darkness. He was like, well, he says, according to what you said and science says, then darkness is not real. He's like, well, I wasn't thinking along that lines, you know, and the professor was going. He says, you are looking at things of a way you can measure by a finite stick. You're thinking that this is the way things are going to go because you can measure it. And he says, if I can measure God and tell you what he does and everything about God, then he wouldn't be God. The professor is like, yeah, I hear what you're going. I see where you're going, right? And then he said to the professor, do you teach your students that they came from a monkey? The professor said, are you talking about the evolutionary process, young man? He's like, yes. He says, well, I teach that. He said, have you ever observed it for yourself? Oh, the professor was quiet. He said, did you ever see any of these humans change from monkey to humans? A matter of fact, name me one person in science that has seen that. Oh, well. And then he said, do you know science cannot explain a thought? They don't comprehend how a human made a thought come into being. The professor was, well. And he says, well, if you are teaching something that you have never seen before, then you're not a scientist. He's like, then what am I? He says, you're a preacher. Because you are sharing your own opinion. He's like, okay. So he was upset. He started to walk away to write on the board. Then the student stood up and said, I'm not finished. What? There's more? He says, yet. He says, class, has any of you ever seen the professor's brain? Have you touched it? Have you smelt it? Have you tasted it? The whole class started to laugh and said, no, we've never seen it. Well, that means, according to science, respectfully, sir, you have no brain. The professor was cut up and he was like, what? He says, listen, we're thinking through philosophy. This is what you're teaching us. He says, then, if you have no brain, professor, why are we trusting your lectures? Why are we listening to you? He turns around to the young man and says, you have to take that on faith. And he says, exactly. Faith is what connects God to man, and that's what makes everything alive. You see, people will try to tell you God is not real. They will come with books. They will come in all sorts of different things and try to tell you that God is not real because they don't understand. And they can't figure out God. But let me tell you something. The human brain is about 3 pounds on average. And if God could fit into our 3-pound brain, then he would not be God. God is supposed to blow our minds. So when people come and tell you there is no God because they can't explain it, then you say to them, that's why he's God. Because if you could explain it, he would never be God. And that's children's time for today. Now you see why I had to change.